So, welcome to HMP. This is our podcast with Generation Z, the Fear of Snowflakes, and I am here with Beth Lennon. And we are here to talk today about hands-on leadership, which I'm actually super excited to talk about. It was one of those things when you mentioned it, I was like, is this something that really the next generation cares about? And you mentioned it really is pretty important.
Yeah, so I was just talking about how I think there's a big difference between micromanaging and hands-on leadership, which
Yeah.
is something that I think Gen Z really values. Because we've had so much like technology, we get the answers really quickly from the internet. I think we want leaders that value how we feel. And I think the difference between micromanaging and hands-on leadership is that when you're given a task, you want someone to explain it and you want someone to explain it well, invest the time in giving you the good directions so that you can do it well the first time and not feel like you're having your time wasted by doing it not the way they wanted it to be done. And then them coming back to you saying, no, that's not at all how I wanted it to be done. Let's do it again a bunch of other times. So I think Gen Z values just that good direction from leaders and leaders who like really care about that.
So that's a really good point. So I think there's a tendency, especially from my generation, to assume, which we're getting so good at assuming so much about you guys, but we assume that because technology is always at your fingertips, that you know enough, or maybe too much, that you don't want us to stand there and give you that hands-on leadership. Like you just want us to hand you a project and allow you to go out and Google the hell out of it and figure it out on your own, right? And so I think part of our generation is the opposite. We're the ones who are just leaving you to figure it out on your own. But you're right. What happens is we come back and we're like, oh, well, yeah, okay, I see how you came up with that, but here's how I would have liked you to have done it. Or maybe you should have come up with this solution, or that's not exactly what I was looking for as, an end result. But shame on us because we didn't give you any direction. We just sent you off and said, use this great device and figure it out on your own. Right. And that's not helpful either.
Yeah, and I also think it allows for Gen Z to like do autonomous work too because we're very creative and that's one
Yeah.
of our skills. So if we're given a direction or like an end goal, it allows us to do it in our own way, but not in a way that like strays so far from what the goal of the project or whatever it may be.
So then so let's use a project. Let's just try an example. So what do you like? So if I was to assign you a project and I said, hey, um, come up with come up with the next meeting agenda for, I don't know, a leadership meeting or something like that. How much detail is what you're looking for? Or does your generation do really well asking a lot of questions to gain that data? Like, are you looking for me to give you, a timeline and an outline and boundaries within, to come up with it in a budget? Or are you going to come back to me and say, hey, I need the following piece of information so I can create what you're looking for? What's the best, communication style for that?
Well, that's why I think it is so important to have hands-on leadership because if you give someone like a set of directions and you sit down with them and you invest the time to tell them about something, then that's when it sparks questions in my head when I'm like, "Oh, I need this information in order to be successful with this."
So basically, what you're saying and what leaders need to understand from this, and this is a huge takeaway for leaders, is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to sit down and have that conversation and build that relationship and build that rapport, with that Gen Z employee or that next level Gen Z leader that you're trying to build, to sit down and talk about what you're trying to accomplish and collaborate together. Because you're right, your generation is very, very creative, but needs structure because
Yeah.
that's not something they know. And the generations, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever the case may be, that generation has structure but has lost their creativity through time. And it's not their fault. A lot of it has to do with just the work-life balance. It has to do with all the crazy world politics that has to do with the pandemic, whatever it is, right? The number of years they've been in the workforce, right? It's been beaten out of them in a lot of ways. So your creativity should spark interest if the ability to collaborate's there. So I think it's a win-win for both.
Yeah, I think it creates a really interesting dynamic, like you're saying, because we have the creative minds, but they have the experience and
Yeah.
like the real knowledge of the subject. So I think when you come together, it really creates like a beautiful product or whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's that border of the micromanagement component, which is super easy to do, especially with your generation, because there's this fear factor still. There's this fear factor that you don't know what to do. And forgive me for saying that because I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying Gen Z is not smart enough to do it, but because you're newer to the workforce and because a lot of your generation is known as the individuals who don't want a 9 to 5 job, there's this fear that you're not able to work autonomous. And if we're not over there following you and hovering over you to make sure that you're within, oh my gosh, are they really doing what they're supposed to be doing? And are they coloring in the lines? There's this fear that you aren't doing it. And so that can easily turn into micromanagement. So tell me though, and I think this is super important for leaders to understand, but what happens to a Gen Z who's been micromanaged? So what occurs inside of you if you're being micromanaged? I think it's important for leaders to know.
Yeah, I definitely think that's kind of why a lot of times people, like companies, aren't able to retain people. Because I think when Gen Z is micromanaged, they feel like, okay, everyone's asking so much of me, but they're not investing time in me. So, like, why would I invest the time in their company and doing this work if they're just going to keep telling me to like make changes and stuff without really sitting down, like giving me the directions to accomplish whatever needs to be accomplished. So I think that's why like companies are seeing that a lot of times because they're not investing the time that they
Yeah.
need.
And so do you find that it's one of those quick turns, like you're gone, or do you find your generation has a tendency to give notice and or say, hey, if this doesn't change, I'm out? I'm noticing it's less confrontational in your generation and more just ghosting, like done.
Yeah, I think that definitely is the case a lot of times. I think people are just like, you know what, I can move on to a different company and try to find something better rather than trying to invest their time in a company that hasn't necessarily done that for them.
Which I think is a huge takeaway for leaders, and they need to understand is there is not going to be a two-way investment without the front way investment. So this is one of those things that leaders need to understand, and people should be teaching leadership in is invest in your employees first, right? It's that culture of the we culture. Invest in people, and they will invest in your business. They'll invest in you. They'll invest in your product, whatever it is. But show them that you care, show them that they have value, show them that what they bring to the table is important. And the way to do that, it sounds like a big way, especially with Gen Z, is by collaborating, by communicating, by bringing ideas together, by allowing them to have a voice at the table, I think is critically important. And that's what it sounds like makes their creative juices flow and makes them want to become a part of the team and stay longer.
Yeah, definitely. And I also feel like COVID had a really big part in that because it happened in such like a formative period of our lives that we kind of lost that like 3 year almost window of collaborating, learning from
Mhm.
people in person. So I feel like now we really do want that like on the job experience and we want to learn from people who know what they're doing. So I think that also could be why this is happening.
Yeah. Do you think that business leaders need to take that into perspective when they're building out teams, like making sure that they have that element in all teamwork? Is there's some collaboration to it and it isn't just like hand off project components and everyone work on their components separately?
Yeah, I definitely think so because I also think that creates a better team of people who wants to work together. And I think better things can be done and faster and just like better products can be made when people work together and put their minds together if they're in different generations or the same age. Like I just think it's really important to be able to work with people that are different ages and in different like positions as you um in the workplace. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Beth. I think that's one of the things that I can't stress enough to leaders is bring every group of people to the table. Like I am a huge advocate for diversity in your teams. So age, career path, skill set, communication style, different areas in the organization, whatever it is, because I think that's where you get the most creativity when you're pulling people who don't normally work together, because they find different areas and different ways of looking at the same problem. And it brings a whole unique style of problem solving together. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think if the generation, especially the younger generation, sees the value in some of that older generation's knowledge, I think it would go a long way. Because I think that's one of the fears that older generation leaders have is that the younger generation doesn't value what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that I think you need to have those different perspectives on everything because the world is always changing so quickly. Like
Yeah.
you need to have the knowledge, but you also need to have the perspective from a younger person and how we should reform things to make it tailored to people who are like growing up and what they want to see.
Yeah, because in all honesty, most of the products that are being made today, most of the services that are being adapted and created are tailoring towards the individuals who are going to be purchasing them from now and into the future, which happen to be the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas, right? I mean, we have to be honest about that. It's not the baby boomers who are purchasing all of the new cars or all the new technology or, fill in the gap. We really have to pay attention to that when you're developing and listen to the people who would be the ones purchasing the products when we're doing that. And we sometimes forget that when we start to do those things.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what is the biggest pet peeve as a Gen Zer when it comes to management style?
I think, well, I feel like I've said this a bunch of times, but I think just, I think we get frustrated when we feel like we're doing busy work a lot of times.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think it feels like when a company doesn't like say why a project matters or like, what are you doing to help the company or something like that. Like, I think people get frustrated when they feel like they're being told what to do so much, but they're kind of like, but why? Like, why should I invest the time to do this, you know?
So the why is important.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why companies really need to emphasize their core values and align their everything they're doing based
Yeah.
off of what their values are. I think that Gen Z like responds really well to that and they're like, "Oh, I get this. Like I understand why I'm doing this now, you know?" And it feels like I should put my time and effort into this because it's something the company values.
It's all about the impact, all
Yeah.
about the impact for Gen Z. And so I love that. I love the why. It is so opposite. So this is one of those things that you and I are going to have to dive into. And I think we should invite a guest of the baby boomer generation to our podcast for it. But one of the things we need to dive into, and one of the biggest things, and you just mentioned it, in the different generations, is the idea that you need to understand why before you can execute. Baby boomer generation, they were taught to just do the work that they're being told by their boss, right? Doesn't matter why you're doing it. You collect a paycheck because the outcome of the work is necessary for the job, right? So there's huge extremes. Like there, you can't get more extreme, right? You need to understand it before you can do it and respect it. They're going to do it. They don't want to understand it. They're going to be respected because they did it. Right. And so I think when this generation asks why, this generation's insulted because why are you asking? Just do the job you're being paid to do, right? And you're going, no, because I don't understand the purpose behind the work I'm doing. I need to have that first. So that's a big difference between the two and a huge gap. How do you figure that out? Like, how do you get both sides to understand that?
Right. And I also think that's why like you're seeing people leave so much because they're like, I could be doing better things with my time. You know what I mean? Which
Yeah.
is like, you need to work, but like that's why people really invest in companies that have that work-life balance and really care about their employees because they feel like they have a purpose there, you know?
Do you think that's why there are so many certain types of jobs that are still open in the market right now? Ones that are more mundane type jobs, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
So if you were to go for a job interview, what are like one of the or two of the questions you'd ask in an interview?
I would definitely ask about their company culture because that's important to me, like making friends at work and being in a place where you feel like comfortable and feel like you can be creative with the people around you is important to me. And
Interesting.
then also the flexibility, definitely.
You and that flexibility. That is such a funny thing. I love that. But I think we take that and we this is that why our podcast is called The Fear of Snowflakes, is we assume flexibility means you want to work 1 hour or 2 hours here or there, or come and go as you please. And that's not what you mean by flexibility by any means. That's that funny extreme that we like to, play up. But what you really mean is some work-life balance, or an ability to be creative and not have to sit at a desk all the time, or to work in remote or hybrid situations, but an ability to truly have the autonomy to choose the best environment and the best balance of location and time to get the job done. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely what I mean. And I feel like that's taken the wrong way a lot of times, but like it shouldn't be. It's not that people don't want to invest in a company and work. It's that I think a lot of the times work can be done more towards like a person's schedule, and they'll be able to have that work-life balance rather than working all the time, but also like not working at the same time, like you're on the clock, but are you actually working? So I think Gen Z is like, why can't we just reform that and get what we need to do done, and then also be able to enjoy like your life outside of work?
Yeah, I think that it's that structure that we have with the whole salaried 40-hour work week. We should all work 40 hours, but really, if it only takes 30 hours to get the job done, why am I sitting here for the other 10, right?
Right.
When I could be doing something else with those hours.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
I totally get where you're coming from with that. It's why I also think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs in your generation too. People who think that, you know what, why go and work for someone else when it's not productive for the amount of time? And I can go and do something on my own that I can be more productive and make an impact and have community in less time and have more balance too, which is
Yeah, and
something
and be able to create their own schedule too.
yeah, exactly. And something we as business owners need to stop and go, okay, whoa, wait a minute. I'm going to lose really good, really creative, really smart people if I can't figure out how to mold the work environment in a way that I can drag those people back into the work environment instead of having them go out and do it on their own.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think takeaways are we need to make sure as leaders that we are being more collaborative and allowing free form creativity and communication, and being a part of a team with our employees and not just handing them off projects and walking away. I think it's important that we don't hover and micromanage, but we definitely make sure that we are providing boundaries, guidelines, direction, deadlines, and the why. The why. Why is this important? How is this impacting the organization? How is this work generating something that's important to the business, to the community, to the bottom line, whatever it is? Those are important things to help keep people engaged. And then also building it into a community. So more project oriented work and less one-on-one work too, I think is important for you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in to the Fear of Snowflakes podcast, where every generation brings something worth listening to. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.